Australia's quietest places rarely announce themselves. They appear beyond the edges of coastal cities and inland highways, where sound thins out rather than disappearing entirely. In these regions, silence is not dramatic or tense. It stretches calmly across long distances, settling into the land as a natural state. For many Americans, this absence of constant noise creates an unexpected cultural contrast. The stillness feels heavier than expected, not because something is wrong, but because nothing is demanding attention. Initial impressions often form quickly. Roads extend for miles with no visible traffic. Small towns pause early in the evening, their streets dim and unhurried. Even natural sounds arrive differently: wind brushing dry grass, insects marking time at night, distant birds instead of engines or sirens. The environment does not fill gaps with background activity. It allows space. For Americans accustomed to a soundscape shaped by movement, conversation, and digital signals, this restraint can feel disorienting. The cultural difference beneath this quiet runs deeper than geography. In many parts of the United States, sound is associated with productivity, safety, and presence. Noise signals that something is happening, that systems are running, that people are nearby. Silence, by contrast, is often interpreted as temporary or suspicious. In Australia's quieter regions, silence is not treated as an interruption. It is a baseline. The landscape does not rush to reassure anyone. This difference appears in daily rhythms. Shops close without apology. Public spaces remain empty without explanation. Conversations are shorter and less performative. There is little pressure to fill pauses. Australians in these environments often treat quiet as respectful rather than awkward. Words are used sparingly, and attention is given to surroundings rather than constant interaction. For Americans, this can create subtle unease. The lack of stimulation removes familiar markers of time and purpose. Without background noise, thoughts become louder. Moments stretch. The land offers no distraction, only presence. What initially seems peaceful slowly reveals itself as challenging, not because the environment is hostile, but because it refuses to manage emotional comfort. In these quiet places, the landscape does not adapt to human expectations. It remains expansive, patient, and indifferent. For Americans encountering this level of stillness, the experience is less about fear and more about exposure, an encounter with a cultural relationship to silence that does not explain itself or seek approval over time. This quiet begins to influence behavior in subtle ways. Movement slows, not out of intention but adaptation. Without crowds or constant sound cues, urgency loses its grip. Australians in these regions often organize life around daylight, weather, and distance rather than schedules packed tightly together. Time feels broader. Activities are spaced apart. Silence becomes a functional part of daily structure rather than an absence to correct. Americans frequently notice this shift during routine interactions. In quieter Australian towns, questions are answered plainly, without embellishment. Small talk is minimal and unforced. Long pauses in conversation are not rushed to resolution. Eye contact may linger briefly, then drift back to the surroundings. The interaction ends without ceremony. Nothing is wrong, and nothing more is expected. This understated social rhythm contrasts sharply with American habits where engagement is often continuous and affirming. The environment reinforces this mindset. Vast open areas provide no visual boundaries, no enclosing walls of buildings or traffic. Sound travels far, but little interrupts it. At night, darkness settles completely, uninterrupted by city glow. The sky becomes expansive, and the land beneath it recedes into shadow. For many Americans, this scale introduces a quiet psychological pressure. The absence of noise mirrors the absence of external structure, leaving individuals alone with perception and awareness. Cultural expectations around control also differ. In the United States, environments are frequently shaped to reduce discomfort: lighting, music, signage, constant updates. In Australia's quiet regions, comfort is not engineered to the same degree. People adjust themselves instead. This expectation of self-regulation can feel unsettling to those accustomed to external cues guiding attention and emotion. There is also a different relationship with risk. Silence does not automatically imply danger. Empty spaces are not assumed to be unsafe. Trust is placed in distance and familiarity rather than surveillance and sound. Americans, conditioned to equate noise with security, may initially misread this calm as vulnerability. Over time, the realization emerges that the quiet is not neglect but confidence, a belief that not everything needs to announce itself to function properly. As days pass in these environments, the quiet begins to reshape perception. Sounds gain clarity. Minor movements register more strongly. Emotional reactions become less immediate and more measured. For Americans, this process can feel like a loss of grounding before it becomes a form of recalibration. The silence is not passive. It actively changes how attention is distributed, preparing the mind for a different pace of existence. Eventually, the unsettled feeling gives way to a clearer understanding of what the quiet represents. These Australian spaces are not empty in the way Americans often interpret absence. They are complete on their own terms. The land does not compete for attention, and the people within it do not perform busyness to confirm their presence. Life continues at a scale that does not require constant validation. This realization often marks a subtle cultural transformation. Americans begin to notice how deeply sound has been used as reassurance, proof of productivity, safety, and belonging. In Australia's quietest places, those assurances are replaced by continuity. Days resemble one another not through repetition, but through stability. The environment does not change to meet emotional needs, and in doing so, it offers a different kind of grounding. Social behavior reflects this philosophy. Community exists without constant interaction. Familiarity is built slowly, through repeated presence rather than frequent conversation. Respect is shown by leaving space rather than filling it. Silence functions as a shared understanding instead of a gap. For Americans, adjusting to this requires releasing the expectation that connection must always be audible. The landscape itself reinforces this emotional climate. Long horizons reduce the sense of urgency. Weather dictates rhythm more than schedules. Quiet nights encourage rest rather than stimulation. Over time, the initial discomfort transforms into awareness. The mind adapts to fewer inputs and perception sharpens. What once felt unsettling begins to feel deliberate. In this way, Australia's quiet places reveal a broader cultural difference. They reflect a society more comfortable with stillness, distance, and understatement. The quiet is not designed to soothe or impress. It simply exists. For Americans, encountering this kind of silence can feel like stepping outside a familiar emotional framework. The unease arises not from isolation, but from meeting an environment that does not respond to expectation, and in that meeting, a quiet insight emerges. Cultures do not only differ in how loudly they speak, but in how much silence they trust. Some landscapes teach this gently. Others do so by refusing to fill the space at all.